Subscribe if you dare, like if you're listening, and drop a comment before the knocking finds your door. The phone still swayed on its cord when he burst into the living room, a pendulum counting out panic. The lamp by the window was on, casting a yellow pool across the rug where Angela's shoes waited with their laces untied. A glass of water sat half-finished, a ring of condensation printed on the coffee table like a time stamp. Outside, the porch light hummed. The street was empty. No neighbors at their windows. Just that thin spring wind brushing the screen door as if it were a second breath. 30 minutes earlier, Angela had called from this very room, whispering that someone was at the door. A stranger. Old truck idling at the curb. Ball cap. Specks of paint on the sleeve like he'd been sanding something. He hadn't said a word, only knocked, with slow, patient intervals that pressed against the call's silence like a metronome. Then the noise, the scuff, the gasp, a muffled plea, and the line had cracked apart. Now, in this small Missouri town, everything felt too neat, too staged, like a set built for one scene and one disappearance. The fiancé, Eric, moved room to room naming her. Angela. Kitchen. Bedroom. Bathroom. He noticed the phone book pulled from the drawer, open to tow services. Her purse on the chair. Car keys missing. On the end table, a sticky note, back soon, A. He knew her handwriting in the same way you know a heartbeat, this wasn't it. The A curled wrong, a practiced imitation missing the hesitation she always had on the first stroke. Outside, tire marks braided into the gravel shoulder and ended at the intersection. Across the street, the drugstore's open sign flickered, reflecting backward in its dark glass. Eric ran there first, and the pharmacist shook his head. No, hadn't seen her tonight. That old truck? Maybe. Could have been anyone, the highway brought strangers that looked like locals. At the payphone, Eric dialed the police with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. By the time the first cruiser rolled up, the porch light had lured a few sleepy faces to their curtains. Detectives arrived before midnight, 2 of them, notebooks like shields. They collected the water glass, the sticky note, a smudge on the doorjamb that might be nothing and might be everything. A neighbor said she heard a short knock, then a longer one, then quiet. Another insisted she saw a passenger door open on a dark pickup. The detectives measured, photographed, lifted, labeled. The house turned into evidence, a life translated into bags and barcodes. Near 1 a.m., a patrolman fanned the phone cord with a pen and frowned at the plastic's pale imprint on the wall. Been swinging longer than it should, he muttered, meaning the disturbance was recent, meaning the clock on this case hadn't even started yet. When they canvassed the street, Eric followed, answering the same questions different ways until the word stripped clean. Where were you? Who would want to scare her? Had anyone been watching the house? Then came the first clue that felt like a trap laid years before tonight. An officer bending to the curb held up a thin rectangle in an evidence bag. It had stuck, half hidden in the damp grass by the porch step, a business card for a roadside payphone 2 miles out on Highway 7. On the back, a number had been scribbled, and beneath it, a message in block letters, door. 3 knocks. Wait. The detective turned the card over, then back again, as if a different angle might soften what it meant. Eric stared at the writing, colder than the air. He had seen those block letters before, in an old flyer his cousin kept about a missing girl from a county over. Same sharp corners. Same rigid spacing. Same instruction. They drove to the payphone, headlights tunneling through quiet farmland. The booth stood under a buzzing light, the kind that makes everything look like a photograph you don't want to keep. Inside, the phone's metal faceplate had fresh scratches. The detective lifted the receiver and listened to nothing. Then he pointed at the shelf beneath the coin slot, where dust should have been thick and undisturbed. A single clean rectangle lay there, the outline of something recently lifted. A cassette tape-sized gap. And, impressed faintly in the dust beside it, a print, not a fingerprint, not a shoe, just the edge of a label peeled halfway free. The adhesive residue spelled 4 letters that knotted every stomach on scene. "Ong." They opened the booth's maintenance hatch, and what lay inside changed the timeline, and the stakes, forever. The cassette wasn't there. Only that empty dust print, the faint glue where a label had once been. Detectives logged it, photographed it, argued quietly over what it meant. Eric just stood in the wash of the gas station's buzzing light, the noise burrowing into his skull like static. Angela's name, half written, half erased, seemed to pulse from the payphone booth like it was alive. By dawn, Highway 7 had turned into a parade of patrol cars. Reporters lingered at the barricade with coffee cups and long lenses. The town, small enough for everyone to know each other, felt suddenly foreign. The detective in charge, Sergeant Mallory, told Eric they'd found tire tracks heading north. Same tread pattern that matched reports from 2 earlier abductions, one in Clinton County, one in rural Arkansas. Both women had disappeared after late-night knocks. Neither case had ever been solved. Mallory spoke in facts, not comfort. He told Eric that Angela might have been lured out by someone pretending to need help, someone who'd studied her routine, maybe even phoned earlier pretending to be a tow truck service. The page from the phone book, the open drawer, the imitation note, each clue whispered calculation. Whoever did this knew how to keep her calm until it was too late, Mallory said, his voice low. For 2 days, volunteers searched the woods near the highway. They found pieces of mail scattered across a ditch, Angela's hospital name tag, a torn photo from her wallet, the corner of a receipt from a diner 70 miles south. The evidence formed a map that led nowhere, a trail designed to exhaust. And yet, every time Eric thought the trail had gone cold, another fragment appeared, too conveniently placed to be random. At the precinct, Mallory's team played a voicemail left on the station line just after midnight on the night Angela vanished. The call lasted 12 seconds. At first, just highway wind. Then a man's voice, calm, distant, recorded like it had been played through another speaker. "She's not who you think she is," he said. "Sometimes people wear the wrong names." Then the click. The timestamp matched the exact moment Angela's phone went dead. The discovery changed the tone of everything. Was this about Angela, or about something she'd stumbled into? Mallory reopened 2 old files from the Midwest disappearances. Both victims had been nurses. Both had worked night shifts. Both had filed anonymous tips about a local clinic that was illegally selling patient drugs. The third nurse, the one who vanished last, was Angela Hammond. Eric refused to believe she was part of any of it. He retraced her life hour by hour. Her locker at the hospital held only her uniform and a crumpled note reading, "Don't trust the man with paint on his sleeves." That detail, the same one she described on the phone, drew a sharp line back to the pickup truck. Witnesses said the man drove a faded green Ford with primer patches along the doors, like an unfinished restoration. 3 nights later, Eric followed that same kind of truck down a back road outside Warsaw. The driver never looked back, but when the taillights flickered red, Eric swore he saw the passenger seat occupied. A silhouette. Long hair catching the reflection. He pressed harder on the gas, heart punching in his chest, but the truck vanished between the trees like a curtain falling. Only the smell of burnt oil lingered. He called Mallory, breathless. The detective arrived minutes later, but the road was empty. Only tire marks curving into a nearby service lane. They followed them until the path ended beside a boarded-up rest stop. The boards were painted with warnings, "Private property, keep out." Eric pointed at the graffiti scrawled across one of the planks. It wasn't new paint. It was carved, old enough that moss grew in the letters. It read, 3 knocks. Then listen. Mallory exhaled, his flashlight shaking slightly. This place was part of the first case, he murmured. They found a woman's bracelet here in '89. Eric didn't move. The night was too still, too patient. Then, from behind the boarded door, came a dull, deliberate sound. One knock. Then another. Then a third. Mallory reached for the latch. The boards creaked like ribs snapping open. And what they saw inside made both men freeze, because Angela Hammond had been there recently. Very recently. The smell hit first, metallic, sharp, like rain on rusted steel. The flashlight beam cut through hanging dust to reveal a room that looked untouched for decades, yet the coffee cup on the counter still steamed faintly. Against one wall sat a metal chair bolted to the floor, and beside it, a reel-to-reel recorder still spinning, tape flapping loose. On the floor, a photo of Angela. She wasn't tied, she wasn't terrified, she was smiling, sitting in that very chair, looking straight into the camera. Mallory froze mid-step. "She's alive," Eric whispered, though he didn't believe it. The detective bent, pressed stop on the recorder, then rewound. The tape hissed before a voice emerged, a man's voice again, patient, calm, too close to the mic. "She knows the truth now. But she won't tell you." None of them did. Then static swallowed the rest. The walls told another story. Photographs pinned in neat rows, each showing a woman in a similar chair, same expression, half calm, half knowing. In the corner, a filing cabinet labeled by year, 1989, 1990, 1991. Only the top drawer was unlocked. Inside were cassette tapes, all marked with first names and the same scrawled initials, DK. Mallory's face drained of color. "Daniel Kerrigan," he muttered, former maintenance supervisor at the old hospital. Fired for harassment in '88. They'd interviewed him once back then, quiet, helpful, the kind who smiled too long when he talked. He'd vanished a month after the last nurse disappeared. The assumption was suicide. But here, every drawer and scrap screamed the opposite. He'd been watching. Documenting. Collecting. Eric found Angela's nurse badge on the table beside the coffee cup. The photo on it had been altered, her smile trimmed off by a new lamination. Beneath her name, someone had scratched another word into the plastic: replacement. Mallory radioed for backup, but the signal broke into static. Eric's light swept over a side door, fresh scratches around the lock. He twisted the handle and stepped into a narrow corridor that smelled like gasoline and rain. At the far end, another door stood slightly open, faint daylight bleeding through. And there, on the wall, finger marks dragged through the dust, as if someone had been pulled away while reaching for freedom. He called her name, once. No answer. Twice. This time, something shifted behind the door. A slow shuffle. Then silence. He pushed it open. The space beyond was nothing but concrete floor and a single exit cut into the hillside. Footprints led out, one set of boots, one set smaller, bare. Mallory caught up, breath short. She got out. "She's ahead of us." They followed the trail up into the tree line. It was dawn again, thin fog catching in the pines. Every sound echoed. Birds, distant traffic, the tap of their own steps. Then, by the roadside, they saw it, Angela's car. Hood dented, driver's door open, keys still swinging. Inside, on the passenger seat, sat another cassette labeled simply, Eric. Mallory warned him not to, but Eric pressed play anyway. Her voice filled the cabin, low and trembling. "If you're hearing this, it means he let me go. Or thinks he did. But he's not alone. He said there's someone else who knows about the tapes. Someone who still works at the hospital. Don't trust the call, Eric. Don't answer the door." A knock cut through the recording, 3 measured hits on wood, and the tape ended with a click. Mallory stared toward the empty road, every muscle locked. Behind them, from the trees, came that same rhythm, 3 knocks, soft but close. Eric turned, heart stopping on the third. The sound wasn't coming from the forest. It was coming from his car. He pulled open the trunk. Empty, except for a stack of new tapes, each freshly labeled. The top one read, Chapter 4, Recording Now. The camera hidden behind the trunk lid blinked red. And the knock came again. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one, hit subscribe, and don't answer the midnight knock.